In April 1945, the longest presidential tenure ended with FDR's death during his fourth term in office. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, better known as FDR, was the 32nd President of the United States from March 1933 to April 1945. He led America through one of the worst domestic crises and the great foreign crisis in American history during his 12-year presidency. FDR's time as president was unprecedented in both length and scope. Roosevelt became president when the US was facing a period of economic depression, but his confidence and political strategies allowed the nation to recover. FDR was the longest serving president who led the US through two major world events, the Great Depression and World War II, and his influence on American politics can still be seen today. Today, I'm going to explain the major events that took place during FDR's 12-year presidency. I will begin by talking about his role during the Great Depression, as it is what he is most known for. From there, we will detail his significant actions during World War II, and finally, why FDR is still respected in the 21st century. Before we get into FDR's legacy, we will start by discussing FDR's impact during the beginning of his presidency. FDR may be most well known for his work during his first two terms in office, as he was elected during the height of the Great Depression. In his article published in the University of Virginia Miller Center, a council focused on publishing nonpartisan political history, William Voigtberg, a professor emeritus of history at the University of North Carolina, explains how Americans in 1932 were looking for a president who would combat the Great Depression more effectively than the incumbent Republican president, Herbert Hoover. Roosevelt's promise of what he called a New Deal was exactly what Americans were looking for, leading him to establish numerous innovative policies that helped the US avoid economic, social, and political disaster after he was elected. With what became formally called the New Deal, FDR aimed to more equally distribute the economic, social, and political proceeds of American capitalism, and the deal accomplished this to an unexpected level. Peter Temin, an economist and an economic historian, also expands on the impact of FDR's New Deal in his journal article, The Great Recession and the Great Depression, published by the MIT Press, explaining how pieces of legislation such as the National Industrial Recovery Act, or NIRA, and the Agricultural Adjustment Act, or AAA, directed a new policy regimen. These acts are just examples of the multitude of FDR's actions taken during the implementation of the New Deal to end the decades-long economic decline. Now that we have talked about what FDR accomplished while America was stuck in the Great Depression to get the nation out of it and the significance of the New Deal, we are going to examine his role in the second crisis that occurred during his presidency, World War II. As previously mentioned, not only was FDR president through the most devastating recession in American history, but he also led the US through World War II, in which he made many political and militaristic decisions. Jeremy Collins, a contributor at the National World War II Museum, interviewed Robert Hamilton, an award-winning biographer and author of the book War and Peace, FDR's Final Odyssey, D-Day to Yalta 1943 to 1945, states that FDR's greatest decision was to consider Hitler to be enemy number one, rather than immediately deal with the other problems that the war caused. FDR was able to successfully get Stalin in agreement to launch a combined offensive attack against Nazi Germany, and Hamilton argues that this was the best decision our FDR could have made during a tumultuous time in world history. However, Hamilton does believe that out of all of FDR's resolutions, they should not all be respected, most notably being the internment of Japanese Americans who were living on the western coast of the United States. He states that Roosevelt likely felt the panic that Americans were feeling following the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor and made the choice to move thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps. Nevertheless, this action does not overshadow FDR's accomplishments during the Second World War, such as uniting the Allies to fight against Hitler and Nazi Germany. Now that we have gone through the two major crises that occurred while FDR was president, I'm going to transition to discussing FDR's legacy. FDR's leadership during times of crisis established his significant influence on American politics and the presidency that can still be seen today. According to William Voigtberg, who was mentioned earlier for his explanation of FDR's role during the Great Depression, FDR forever reshaped the American presidency through the bond that he was able to build between himself and the American people. This was done through Roosevelt's fireside chats, which allowed him to institute himself as a caretaker for American citizens. Additionally, Leuchtberg explains how the presidential duties expanded, making the president the chief executive of policy implementation, as well as someone who worked to draft these policies. FDR formally and permanently changed the structure of the White House when he enacted the Executive Reorganization Bill, further cementing his expansive legacy. Furthermore, Paul Sparrow, director of the FDR Presidential Library, discusses how exactly FDR influenced modern American society. In his article entitled The 75th Anniversary of FDR's Death, His True Legacy, Leadership in Times of Crisis, Sparrow writes, "The society we live in today is based on his vision of global cooperation and economic equality. Social security, minimum wage, and a 40-hour work week, child labor laws, the World Bank, NATO, and the United Nations are all just a small part of Roosevelt's expansive legacy. But it is his inspiring leadership in the face of global catastrophe and his ability to speak hard truth and instill confidence in the future that are most relevant today." Today, we have learned about FDR's impact during the Great Depression, World War II, and how this has led to decades-long influence on the American government. Even though FDR inherited a country in the middle of an economic depression, he was able to move the country forward through his implementation of the New Deal. Also, while the US was still recovering from the Great Depression, the nation was thrust into World War II, making FDR president through another catastrophe. Roosevelt had a notable impact during the war as he helped the Allied forces defeat Hitler and Nazi Germany. FDR's long presidency was not perfect, but he is still seen as an inspirational figure whose influence is still seen in American politics today.